PrepTest 73 of the first reading comp passage. It's available as well on familiar.lsac.org. It's section 4 on the exam there. So I want you to take a few moments, just read over this passage. This is the entire passage text, and then we can talk about it together for a little bit before diving into specific questions related to this passage. So just take a few minutes, read it over, and then we can talk about it. I'm going to time you here on my phone. I'll give you about 2.5, 3 minutes to do an initial read of the passage, and then we'll talk about it together. Okay, so this was about 2.5 minutes, and so if you didn't get through the entire thing, that's okay. Some passages could take you up to 3 minutes or longer, and especially if science isn't your thing, totally fine. But as always, the topic shouldn't matter that much. The vocabulary might scare you, the topic might scare you a little bit, and that's natural, but we're reading, as always, for the structure, not for the details themselves. So looking at this particular passage, I'm thinking, okay, Darwin, natural selection, evolution. We probably all have some general frame of reference for that, but I'd be looking for a key word or phrase or sentence that kind of summarizes the thesis or the general idea of the passage itself. And so I'm focusing specifically on my initial read in these lines here. This group of self-proclaimed strict constructionist Darwinians has recently risen to prominence by reducing the theory in just this way. So we have a conflict here between Darwin's articulation of his theory of evolution versus these strict constructionists. So the strict constructionists are actually at odds with Darwin himself. Darwin says evolution isn't just about natural selection, but there are these other people who do reduce it to being simply just natural selection. Then we have a summary of what natural selection is, and then we have many different examples. But in fact, nature provides numerous examples of attributes, for example, over here, and then additionally, we have something else undermining the strict constructionist claim, and so on. So we have a number of examples that are problematizing the strict constructionist view. So overall, I'd be reading this and saying there are two major viewpoints here. We have Darwin's viewpoint on his end saying evolution is not just natural selection. Then on the other hand, we have the strict constructionists who say pretty much it is just all about natural selection. So I think this is an important distinction here. Maybe it's a little bit counterintuitive that Darwin wouldn't have the strict constructionist view himself, but that is the case here. And they're basically saying that things are more complicated than the strict constructionists might believe them to be at first glance. The student's saying, as this is a science passage, I knew I would need to focus more. After reading, I quickly thought about the big picture. Darwinians who believe it's the only means are not correct in their thinking. They're called the strict constructionist Darwinians. So these are the people who are too strict and not in line with what Darwin himself believes. And the passage says they actually contradict what Darwin himself says. And the author's viewpoint is, yes, skeptical towards what the constructionists say. The author is more in line with what Darwin is saying over the constructionists. So I think these two paragraphs here are a perfect articulation of what the author is saying here. So very well done to the student. Now let's take a look at some of the questions associated. What is the main idea? What's the main point of the passage? And I think a prephrase could be useful here. So we have the two sides, Darwin versus the strict constructionists. And we have the student here saying that the passage, meaning the author, explains, so the strict constructionists are wrong when they say evolution is the only means. Perfect. So the author's viewpoint is one of skepticism, and the strict constructionists are wrong in their viewpoint. So excellent job there. Is there a choice that best matches this? So it's something counter to what the strict constructionists are saying, not about what, like B says, according to the strict constructionists, that's not what we like, we are against them. But A saying undermines the strict constructionist claim. That's perfect. So I'd say A is a winner here. Looking at the others, new evidence demonstrating natural selection can produce non-adaptive as well as adaptive changes. It's not really about one versus the other. It's about Is natural selection the sole or primary explanation for evolution versus there potentially being others as well? So C is out. D saying natural selection is responsible for all evolutionary change. Is that the main point to articulate what the strict constructionists say? D is technically correct in that that is what the strict constructionists believe. But is the main point of the passage simply to articulate their view? Or is the point of the passage to articulate their view and then to show why it's wrong? So for that reason, D is out. Then looking at E, evidence from population genetics disproving the claim that natural selection results in the survival of the fittest. I'd say that could be more of a specific detail that's covered in the passage potentially. Right? We do have the example of the dinosaurs as a population here. Then in the third paragraph here, we do have some discussion of populations as well, population genetics over here. But that's a detail, that's evidence. That's not really core to the argument as a whole. I think the major viewpoint here is really summarized well in the first paragraph, Darwin versus the strict constructionist, and then the rest of the evidence goes on to dismiss the strict constructionist viewpoint there. So A is correct for number one, and I think that question one here, the student's articulation was well done. The constructionists are wrong, is pretty much the overall point there. So well done on that one. Let's take a look at number two here. Mammals were able to survive catastrophic environmental changes that occurred roughly 65 million years ago because they. So why were mammals able to survive that long ago? So 65 million, I'm thinking about the dinosaurs, and we could scan for the number if we need to. 65 million right here. So we want to look around here. Smaller animals, then talking about mammals, fared relatively well. So why did the mammals survive? Well, when we see mammals right here, we know that we have to look a little bit prior to that because they're saying this scenario explains why. So what came prior? The mammals were quite small because they could not compete on the large scale of the dominant dinosaurs. Smaller animal, and then going prior a bit earlier, smaller animal species are generally able to better able to survive the catastrophic changes in climate. So big climatic changes, big animals can't survive that well. Smaller animals can. So we have small, choice B right there. We're relatively small, perfect fit. Going to the student's articulation here. Answer directly found in the passage. Excellent, well done. Went back and started to read the fourth paragraph. See paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, this is the key paragraph. Excellent. Lines 43 to 48. So I'm guessing that's probably right from where the places I underlined small animal species. Mammals fared relatively well. Now, speaking of line references, one thing you'll see is that on the digital LSAT, you don't have line numberings. And so I'm working with you here on the digital LSAT version of this question. I'm gathering the student was working on the paper version where you do get line references. And so something you want to keep in mind is that you won't really have that ease of reference with lines when you're doing the digital LSAT version. For those of you taking in July, you may potentially get digital, and then of course in the fall, everyone's getting digital. So just keep that in mind. Another thing you want to know about the digital format is that, as I've been underlining on here, you can underline on the digital format, but you can't do a lot of handwritten annotations on the passage itself or on the screen itself. You'll have to use scrap paper on the side. So just keep that in mind as you move forward with your prep. But well done on number two here. So number three, detail about the author's opinion. The author asserts which one of the following regarding mutations of genetic material. So in your mutations of genetic material, where might we find that discussion? So I'd be scanning for either word, genetic or mutations, and see where they might appear in the passage. And one technique you want to have under your belt is being able to scan quickly for key words or key phrases, kind of like a control F in your mind. And so scanning through here, I'd be scanning paragraph 3 up here, middle top is where we have middle out of the 3 columns, and then up top, mutations of genetic material right here in the second line of the third paragraph. That's where we want to scan for this, where we want to look for our information here. So what does the author assert about this? There are many things they could assert here. I think the key assertion they have is that mutations are not only beneficial, as evolution might suggest. People might have thought in terms of natural selection that mutations are always beneficial. That's why they exist. But some are neither beneficial nor harmful. They're saying some enhance reproductive success, others are harmful, but most fall into neither category. That's the key. So we have neutral, non-adaptive changes that account to a large extent for the evolution of DNA. So most mutations are neither good nor bad. So I'd be looking for a choice that goes along those lines, suggesting that they're neutral. And that's really what I would be focusing on here. So neither good nor bad. So A is saying, are they passed on or not? We don't know. They're actually saying here that they say that most have no effect on reproductive success, but they do account to a large extent for the evolution of DNA, and their persistence is not explainable. So that suggests that actually they might, in fact, be passed on from one to the next. So A, I would eliminate. B, mass extinctions taking place. That's a kind of a mixed up combination of paragraphs 3 and 4, because paragraph 4 is on the mass extinctions, paragraph 3 is on mutations, not really connected to each other quite so directly. So B is out. C, changing behavior rather than appearance. That's a total non sequitur. That's not even discussed at all in the passage as a whole, I think. Behavior, appearance. That's kind of mentioned in the first paragraph, form and behavior and form being appearance, but not showing up later. So C is out. D, no effect on reproductive success. Excellent. That's perfect. Saying neutral, non-adaptive, neither category, good nor bad. So students saying D, evident in lines 27 and 28. Perfect. So that's the correct answer. Excellent. That's coming right from, I'm guessing, once again, up here. And I also like the student articulating here, B, a link or connection between mass extinctions and genetic mutations never made. Again, back to connecting 3 and 4. So well done. Then choice E, large versus small. Again, that's kind of, I'd say it's a random combination of paragraphs 3 and 4, mutations being in 3, and the discussion of large versus small being in 4. Again, those smaller animal species, like the mammals, versus the large ones like the dinosaurs. So well done on this one as well. Let's go on now to questions 4 and 5. Okay, so the author is most likely to agree with which one of the following statements. So general inferential question here. General, no clear starting off point. I would simply take one choice at a time and check it against the passage to see what matches well. So author most likely to agree, natural selection responsible for almost none of the characteristics. This is kind of, I would say, an exaggeration overall. It's far too strong. They're saying that natural selection is, even Darwin says, the main but not the exclusive means of modification in the first paragraph. But A is a caricature of that, saying it's a caricature of the counter-constructionist viewpoint. Because we have, on the one hand, Darwin's opinion, saying natural selection is not the only thing. We don't want to reduce it to only natural selection, versus the constructionists who say it's responsible for everything. So the opposite of everything is nothing, which is why A might be tempting, but it's still far too strong. And I can see that the student here considered this as the correct answer and kept it as a contender. And I can see why. I think A was a tempting choice, but like I said, it's too strong. B, species flourishing is not proof of its adaptation. I'd say that's an excellent point here. That's going along the lines of the fact that the mammals survive, but they just did relatively well compared to the dinosaurs. And maybe they filled the void of the dinosaurs, and saying their success was the result of dumb luck. So they could not have adapted in advance to conditions caused by the impact. So perfect. It's not adapted. It just got lucky. B is excellent. The student found this in choice in paragraph 4 as well. So well done on this one. The student did choose B also. Let's look at C. Only evolutionary changes that provide some advantage to a species are transmitted to subsequent generations. This is directly counter to what we discovered earlier in the passage, looking at the third paragraph, saying that most substitutions have no effect. Many are neutral. Some are enhancing success. Others are harming success. So not only successful ones are transmitted. Most that are transmitted have no effect. Their persistence is not explainable by natural selection. So C is out. Yeah, the student says it contradicts that paragraph as well. Choice D, large animal species are generally unable to survive in harsh environmental conditions. This one could be tempting because the dinosaurs are the example of a large species that did not survive when things got tough. But that's only one example, not the only example. Saying generally is far too strong an inference to extrapolate from a single example of the dinosaurs. The student here said catastrophic versus harsh. And I can see that those are not, of course, the exact same word, but I don't think that's why D is wrong. I think D is wrong because it's saying generally when the passage was only using this example of the dinosaurs as a single data point to show that mammals could survive due to getting lucky, not from actually adapting to the circumstances. So I think catastrophic versus harsh, that's a decent-ish substitute. Both of them are negative, severe environmental impacts. So I think that's why D is wrong. So I would just want to clarify that one for the student writing this explanation. Then looking at E, natural selection is useful for explaining form but not behavior. That's referring back to this last sentence in paragraph 1. But this is kind of like a mix-up or mashup of two different things here. They're saying that the strict constructionists say it's responsible for both form and behavior, but there's no distinction between the two covered in the passage here. So yes, failing to mention the difference between them is good. So well done on that one. E is out. So B is our answer by elimination, and we also discussed it as well. Then finally, we can look at number 5 here. So the author stands towards the arguments of the strict constructionists, Darwinians. So how does the author feel about them? This is kind of a general tone question, similar to a main idea, in fact, because it's related to the author's opinion overall. Now, we know here the author, in general, is not in line with the strict constructionists. The author, in fact, thinks that they are wrong in being overly strict and provides many examples throughout counter to what they believe. So it's going to be negative. It's not endorsing them. It's not unreserved endorsement. It's not conditional agreement. It's not neutral either. It's negative. So it's either emphatic disagreement or mild disapproval, one of the two. Now, normally I'd say we want to, all else being equal, gravitate towards milder language and away from stronger language, which would put us in line with what choice B is saying. But in fact here, throughout, the author is giving example after example after example of why the strict constructionists are wrong. And so for that reason, it's not simply mildly disapproving of them. It's in fact saying that things can happen by way of dumb luck. And it's not explainable by natural selection with regard to these alterations in paragraph 3. So throughout, it's wholly negative. It's entirely negative. And so I would say that B is out and A is correct, emphatic disagreement. And the student here is saying that the author gives no evidence that would support their view. So it's not as qualified or cautious as mild disapproval would be here. A, emphatic disagreement is actually correct here. I think an example of too strong would be like insultingly dismissive or something like that. That would be extreme negative. A is actually not extreme negative. It's simply more moderate negative, and B is mild negative. But well done on this one overall.